Movies make Roman weapons look cool and dramatic, but the real story is completely different. The Gladius, the Pilum, the shield, they were used in ways Hollywood never shows. Roman soldiers fought tightly packed, fast, and with brutal precision. And once you learn how these weapons actually worked, you'll see Roman warfare in a totally new way. Number 1. The Gladius they never show in movies. Most movie scenes make the Roman Gladius look like a heroic blade used for long, dramatic sword duels. But the real purpose of this weapon had almost nothing to do with cinematic sword fighting. The Gladius was intentionally short because Roman soldiers fought in extremely tight formations where long swings were useless. When legionaries advanced, they stood shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapped, barely an arm's length from the enemy. A shorter sword meant better control, faster strikes, and fewer wasted movements. Rome didn't care about dramatic fights. They wanted predictable, disciplined efficiency. Soldiers didn't rely on big, wild swings. Their training focused on controlled thrusting from behind the scutum. A legionary would press the shield forward, create a tiny opening, and deliver a quick, accurate stab. Then immediately return behind the shield. The entire combat cycle was built around rhythm. Step forward, strike, retract, guard. No spinning, no clashing blades with theatrical sparks, no choreographed duels. The Gladius was extremely effective because it fit perfectly into a system of formation warfare designed to eliminate chaos. Another thing films rarely show is how standardized Roman training was. Legionaries drilled the same movements thousands of times until their reactions were automatic. They practiced precise footwork, proper weight shifting, and coordinated steps with their fellow soldiers. The goal wasn't individual glory, it was group stability. A single soldier stepping too far forward could break the line, so everything was about control. That discipline is exactly why the Gladius worked so well. It wasn't the blade alone. It was the soldier plus, the training plus, the formation. And the Gladius wasn't a fixed design. As Rome expanded and fought new enemies, the shape changed. In Hispania, soldiers struggled against fast-moving tribes who fought at close range, so the blade became shorter for better handling. In other regions, it was slightly lengthened for reach. This weapon constantly evolved because Rome engineered it to match real battlefield conditions, not cinematic aesthetics. Real Roman soldiers also used heavy wooden practice swords that were nearly double the weight of the actual Gladius. This wasn't meant to look impressive. It was simple strength conditioning. Legionaries had to develop strong wrists, forearms, and shoulders to perform repetitive strikes for long periods. Movies usually show soldiers fighting energetically for minutes without tiring, but real combat demanded endurance and technique, not flashy performance. That's the true nature of the Gladius, a practical, efficient tool built for formation warfare, not a shiny centerpiece of action scenes. Number 2. The Pilum that broke armies before combat even started. While films love showing sword fights, they almost always ignore the weapon that actually shaped Roman victories, the Pilum. This was not a normal spear. It wasn't meant for dueling or long-range throwing competitions. The Pilum existed to ruin shields, disrupt formations, and weaken the enemy before close combat began. That thin iron shank at the tip wasn't fragile by accident. It was designed to bend on impact. When a Pilum struck a shield, it often stuck deep into the wood and then bent under its own weight. Removing it took time, and even if removed, the spear couldn't be reused. For the enemy, the result was simple but devastating: a ruined shield. Opponents either dropped it entirely or carried a heavy, awkward burden that slowed every movement. And slowing even one enemy line slowed everyone behind them, creating a cascade of disorder before the Romans even reached them. What films also get wrong is the sheer coordination behind Pilum throws. Roman officers didn't yell, "Throw!" randomly. The throws were synchronized in waves. The first line released their pila at close range to destroy the front line shields. The second line targeted fighters behind them. The third line threw at the enemy rear or cavalry trying to reposition. It wasn't about dramatic visuals, it was about systematically destabilizing the opposing formation. Once that formation broke, the Romans advanced, shields locked, ready to finish the fight with organized pressure. Pila also came in several variations, some heavier for armor penetration, others shaped to pierce shields more easily. Rome constantly adjusted the pilum for each battlefield, showing the same engineering mindset found in all their weapons. And unlike what movies portray, Romans rarely picked pila back up after throwing them. These were single-use tools meant to create an opening, not long-term equipment for extended fighting. This weapon's real power came from its strategic effect. Before the first clash of shields, the enemy line was already compromised. Shields weakened, formations uneven, confidence shaken. The psychological effect mattered just as much as the physical damage. Many ancient accounts describe warriors panicking when Pila began raining down. Facing that coordinated storm of iron was terrifying, and the fear alone could break morale. This is the part Hollywood never tells. The Pilum wasn't exciting to watch, but it was absolutely crucial in winning battles long before swords came out. Number 3. The Scutum as the foundation of Roman fighting. The Roman Scutum is iconic in films, but it's almost always shown incorrectly. Movies treat it like a passive defensive object, a big rectangular shield soldiers hide behind. But the real Scutum wasn't just protection. It was an active offensive component of the Roman fighting system. The shield's curved shape allowed legionaries to absorb force while pushing forward. Its size created walls when combined with neighboring shields, forming a moving barrier that didn't just block attacks, but controlled space on the battlefield. The metal boss in the center wasn't decorative. It was meant for striking. A Roman soldier used the Scutum to hit, shove, trap, and destabilize opponents. The real sequence of Roman combat wasn't swing sword first. It was push with shield, unbalance the opponent, strike quickly with the Gladius, reset. The shield was the engine that powered Roman close combat. Roman training taught soldiers to use the Scutum as part of a larger system. When a legionary stepped forward to strike, his shield partner on the left supported the motion by maintaining the wall. When he returned to guard position, the formation stayed tight. Movies love chaotic battles with mixed-up lines, but Romans avoided that chaos entirely. Their shields created order. That disciplined wall of Scuta advanced steadily, controlling tempo and distance, making it extremely hard for opponents to fight freely. Carrying the Scutum wasn't easy either. It was large, and depending on the materials, could weigh several kilograms. Soldiers marched long distances with it, then fought while repeatedly pushing, lifting, and bracing it. Maintaining the shield required constant work repairing cracks, reinforcing edges, and replacing binding materials. A weak shield wasn't just dangerous for the individual soldier, it jeopardized the entire formation. The Scutum also had a huge psychological impact. Imagine facing a perfectly aligned line of identical shields advancing with measured, synchronized steps. Ancient writers often describe this sight as terrifying. It created the impression of facing a single organism rather than individual men. That sense of unity made Roman formations incredibly hard to break. Even when outnumbered, their shield line maintained structure, which gave soldiers confidence and made enemies hesitate. This is why Hollywood's version of Roman fighting feels exaggerated and disconnected from historical reality. Rome didn't win battles through heroic duels or dramatic moments. They won through engineering, coordination, and disciplined systems. The Gladius, Pilum, and Scutum weren't independent weapons. They were interlocking components of a method built for consistency. When you understand how these tools actually work together, you see a very different picture from what movies show. Not flashy sword fights, but a synchronized military machine built to dominate ancient warfare through structure, precision, and relentless pressure. Number 4. The Roman helmet that did far more than protect the head. In most films, the Roman helmet, the Gala, is treated like a background accessory shiny metal, a crest on top, and nothing more. But the real Gala was one of the most carefully engineered pieces of military gear in the ancient world. Its design was not about looking impressive. It was built to solve very specific battlefield problems that Rome faced for centuries. The cheek guards protected the sides of the face from glancing blows while still letting the soldier breathe and communicate. The neck guard was angled to deflect downward strikes, especially from cavalry weapons. And the brow ridge helped redirect impact away from the eyes and forehead. But what movies never show is how the Galea played a communication role. The acoustics inside the helmet allowed soldiers to hear commands more clearly in the chaos of battle. Roman officers developed specific signals, short, loud orders and horn patterns, that soldiers could catch even through the noise of shields, boots, and shouting. Without that clarity, Roman formations would fall apart instantly. So the helmet wasn't just armor. It was part of Rome's battlefield communication network. The interior of the helmet was also padded, not for comfort, but for stability during long engagements. A loose helmet could blind a soldier or affect his balance, so Rome made sure the inside was fitted tightly but comfortably. That's something movies rarely bother to show. In reality, Roman soldiers spent time adjusting padding before battles, tightening straps, and ensuring the helmet sat perfectly aligned. A misaligned helmet in ancient combat meant danger. Another thing Hollywood doesn't show is how the helmet reflected rank and identity. While crests in movies are mostly for dramatic visuals, in Rome they had practical purposes. A transverse crest, running left to right, made centurions easy to spot in formation. Vertical crests were used in parades, or by certain units to show status, but in active combat, most soldiers wore simpler designs because flashy decorations could make them easier targets. The materials used for helmets also evolved. Early helmets were bronze. Later ones were made of iron, which was stronger, easier to repair, and better suited for mass production. Rome always optimized equipment based on supply lines, cost, and battlefield needs. There was no romantic attachment to tradition. If a new design worked better, they adopted it. That constant evolution is one of the reasons Roman legions outperformed so many ancient armies stuck in outdated methods. But perhaps the most overlooked aspect is how helmets work together with shields in formation. A Roman soldier didn't rely on one piece of equipment. The helmet protected the head, the shield covered the torso, the armor handled the rest, and the formation locked everything into place. When one soldier lowered his shield slightly to thrust, the helmet compensated for the brief exposure. Everything in the Roman military system was interconnected, not individual gear, but coordinated survival. Movies love to show soldiers ripping off helmets mid-battle, throwing them aside dramatically. A real Roman would never do that. The Galea was life-critical equipment. Losing it in formation would be unthinkable. It shows how much cinematic depictions differ from the disciplined, methodical reality of Roman warfare. The Galea wasn't glamorous. It was a product of engineering, repetition, and practical logic. Number 5. Roman armor as a system, not a costume. When people think of Roman armor, they often picture the segmented plate armor, the lorica segmentata. Movies use it because it looks visually impressive. But historically, Rome employed several types of armor, each chosen for specific purposes and adapted over centuries. The most common early on was chainmail lorica hamata, because it was durable, flexible, and excellent at covering the body without restricting movement. Chainmail wasn't glamorous, but it protected countless soldiers in Rome's formative wars. What movies don't show is how armor worked as part of a layered defensive system. Roman soldiers wore a padded undergarment beneath the metal layers. This padding absorbed the impact of blows, prevented chafing, and distributed weight evenly. Without it, wearing armor for hours would have been unbearable. Armor wasn't a costume, and it wasn't meant to look perfect. It had dents, repairs, discoloration, and constant maintenance marks. Soldiers spent evenings cleaning, adjusting, and fixing their armor because any weak point could be catastrophic in formation fighting. The famous lorica segmentata was brilliant for mobility and offered excellent protection against cutting attacks. But even that armor wasn't universal. Rome used it mostly in the imperial period, and even then, not for all legions. It required more upkeep and more precise manufacturing, so chainmail and scale armor remained widely used for their reliability. The idea that all Roman soldiers marched around in shiny segmented armor is a Hollywood simplification. The real Roman army looked varied, practical, and battle-ready, not uniform and polished. Rome also understood that armor alone didn't protect a soldier, coordination did. A legionary's armor was designed around how the formation functioned. Since soldiers fought in tight ranks, they didn't need massive side protection because the shield wall covered those gaps. Armor focused on front exposure and upper body vulnerability. It wasn't designed for lone warriors, it was designed for synchronized groups of men moving as one. An important detail movies never touch on is the heat. Wearing armor under the Mediterranean sun for hours while marching was exhausting. Soldiers trained constantly to adapt to the heat, build stamina, and maintain performance despite the temperature. Roman discipline wasn't just about battlefield tactics. It was about physical resilience. Soldiers conditioned their bodies to handle long campaigns, heavy gear, and harsh environments. That's why a Roman soldier was often described as more of a walking machine than a typical warrior. Maintenance was constant. Every night in camp, part of the routine was checking armor for damage. Legionaries repaired straps, hammered out dents, and cleaned metal surfaces to prevent corrosion. Not because they cared what the armor looked like, but because durability meant survival. That's the practical mindset Hollywood rarely captures. The Roman army wasn't glamorous. It was efficient, disciplined, and always prepared. Armor also reflected Rome's supply system. Factories called fabricae produced standardized pieces in large quantities. That level of industrial organization gave Rome a huge advantage. Soldiers could replace damaged armor with standardized parts, keeping the army consistently ready for combat. This logistical network is almost never shown in movies, but it was as important as any weapon on the battlefield. When you look at the Gladius, Pilum, Scutum, helmet, and armor together, you start to see the real picture of Roman warfare. It wasn't about heroic individual combat or flashy action scenes. It was about a system engineering, discipline, synchronized formations, and constant adaptation. Rome didn't just build weapons, they built methods. And that method is the real secret behind their battlefield success, something movies almost always simplify, soften, or completely ignore.